and still be blind. But now I see. That was grace. But the other woman, the other wife, was named Penina or Penina, which one you want to take. But her name meant jewel. I want y'all to hold on to that one. Jewel. The problem in the house was Elkanah loved Hannah more than he loved Penina. But Penina could birth children. And Hannah was barren. Barrenness in that day was shameful. And yet, Elkanah loved Hannah. He loved grace. And as time passed, Penina was popping out babies. And throwing it up in Hannah's face. What a burden is put on this woman of grace. I don't know why people think that because you have favor with God, that you won't have any problems. I don't know who sent out that memo. That if you love God, if you walk with God, that you're not subject to some misfortune. And yet Hannah had to live. Oh God, I don't want to go down this road. It's too painful to go down this road of somebody who wants to do the right thing, the right way, because of the problems, because of certain situations. They have to live with folk that look down at them. To treat them as if they are inferior. To look at them as if they are nothing. I don't want to go down this road because I sense some people here who have had Hannah experiences. People that pick at you, and tease you, and taunt you. On your job, they mistreat you, always trying to keep you under their foot. I'm telling you, I don't want to go down this line. It's too painful to see people who have been abused by other folk, to make themselves feel good. They look down on you. You know, that's really the story behind racism. There is some who think that they are superior because of the color of their skin. They may not have as much education, they may not have as much money, but because of the color of their skin, they look at you as if you are not as good. Hannah, Grace, had to live with another woman. Her name was Jewel. And for some reason, I sense that Elkanah, one who's God-possessed, he's trying to encourage Sister Hannah. He lets her know often that you got my heart. She may have my chicks, my children, but you got my heart. She ain't all that to me. She ain't all that to me. In fact, she's a jewel. She's just an ornament. She just an add-on. It ain't nothing to it. I'm just trying to be the father that I ought to be with the children I have. But you're the one I really, really love. Do you think that made Hannah feel good? To know that the add-on can add on. Y'all don't get that. Do you think that lifted her up in her spirits? In her spirit, I sense there's a major struggle. In fact, if you really look at the scriptures about it, she became angry. Grace got upset. Grace got ticked off. Got ticked off. That's why I tell you, be careful how you push for, because you push the wrong button, you might see another side. Yeah. I'm holy and I'm happy, but don't hurt me. That's why you have to be very careful how you deal with folk. Even in church. Some of y'all are cussing out. Because you're so close to being cussed out right in church. You're real close, man. Not for me, but I'm just talking about cussing folks sitting around. Some folks forget where they at sometimes. And they lose it for a minute because you messing with them. You keep throwing up in your face how you so much better than they are, how you so much holier than they are, and they're a little upset behind it, and they're tempted to go off. But thanks be to God, Hannah, she got upset. She became angry. But Hannah, at the point of her losing it, she looked to God. If you're going to look at God, you got to learn how to look to God. She went in prayer. And she prayed a prayer. She prayed a prayer. Requesting from God, I want a son. I want a child. I want to set the record straight that you have not forgotten me. I want evidence that you're still on my side. But she also prayed a prayer of request, but she also prayed a selfless prayer. She said, God, if you give me what I want, I'll give it back to you. Maybe that's where some of us missed it. We got what we want from God, but God ain't had nothing to do with it since. We want God to give us, but then we don't want God to use it. Everything you have ought to be available to God. You mean you tell me God give you a car and you won't let God use it? You mean tell me God gives you a house and you won't let God use it? Give you money and you won't let God use it? He said, God, if you give me this child, if you do this, I'll give it back to you. And when she was praying, her lips began to tremble. I know something about that. The Quakers, one reason they call it, there's another one called the Shakers. Quakers, Shakers. There was something about when the Spirit moved on them, something began to move on them. Yeah, if God moves on you, something ought to move on you. And I believe it was, who was it that saw it and thought something was wrong? Somebody ought to holler, but it was something right. So when God moves on you, it's something right. It means something getting ready to happen. And God informed her that by next year this time, you're going to have what you want. I wish I had 5 folk in here, which is the number of grace, would just reach up and said, I receive that right now. By next year this time, I'm going to have what I want. Sometimes, Brother Tim, it takes time to get what you want. And so it did happen. It did happen. Just like she still had to go back home and get with her hubby. And they got together and now she's pregnant. And now she's ready to deliver, and she's delivered. And when she has weaned the child, she finally gives him back to God by putting him in the hands of spiritual people. I would recommend parents, you need to make sure that your children be around spiritual people. If you want them to get to know the God that you know, you need to have them in an atmosphere of spiritual people. And so the story goes on, and now we're in chapter 2 right quickly. She has done what she said she would do, and now it says, and she prays. I want you to understand that it says she prays, but we need to recognize that no prayer is complete without praise. I don't care if you pray for a scoop of ice cream. You ought to say thank you somewhere. When you pray to put the ceiling on the lid, you ought to add a thank you. Some of y'all just a thank you away from what you've been praying for. And so it says, and she prays, and when you look at God, you got to look to God first of all to be your source. Yeah. She went to God because for some reason or another she believed that God was her source. And many of us make the mistake in life. We have made other things our source. We run to this and we run to that, and we feel like if we don't have this and we don't have that, we cannot survive. But don't you know you were living before you got that job? You were living before you got that person in your life. God has to be your source. There are no resources without the source. All of my help comes from the Lord. He's my source. He's the source of my strength. He's the strength of my life. She could have went like some of us today. You know, some of us, when folk mess with us, we go to the gun shop. Let me go get me a weapon. I'm gonna put an end to this. But she said, no, I'm going to a higher power. I'm going to somebody that can handle it. I'm going to somebody that can take care of my situation. And so when you look at God, you got to look to God to be your what? But not only look to God to be your source, you got to look to God to be your Savior. God. Listen what she says when she has come through this ordeal and recognize that God is a source. It says, and Anna prayed and said, my heart rejoiceth in the Lord. In other words, I got my desire back. I was depressed. I was distraught. I was disturbed. I was getting ready to give up, but now I got my desire back. I got my desire to live in spite of what folks say about me, in spite of what folk have done to me. I'm going to live through this. God. She says, I got my desire back. But not only do I have my desire back, Reverend James said, I got my dignity back. Because she says, the Lord, mine horn is exalted in the Lord. In other words, there are two pictures I want to quickly reveal to you. The horn is mentioned, and the picture is of deer, the deer antlers. It indicated part of their strength in fighting. Yeah, but the other indication of this word horn, it was a trinket that was on the veil. And depending on the position of the horn, it meant that the person has regained their dignity. I want you to know today that she has gotten her desire back, but not only her desire back, she got her dignity back. But then not only that, she says, my mouth that I had to keep muted. I was too embarrassed to go around folk because people were talking about me and people were laughing at me people were saying, Elkanah loves her, but Penina, she the one, she got his babies. And I had to eat dirt every day. I had to listen to the rhetoric. I had to listen to the lies. I had to listen. I had to be muted. But God now has given me a declaration. When you look at God, you look at God not only as your source, but you look at God as your Savior. Whoever you depend on, that's who you are expecting to deliver you. He said, I'm rejoicing because I rejoice in thy salvation. I want you to know that the closer you get to God, the stronger you get. I want to try something. Let me try something. It's a few of us here today. Let me try. And you got to follow instructions for this to work. Can you do that? I'm going to start at the back. And all I want you to do at the back is to stand up and start clapping your hands. The first, the last, there you go. All right, the next row. 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 All the way. Then you can stop. Did you notice the closer it got to uphill, the louder it got? I want you to know the closer you get to God, the stronger you get. I heard y'all in the back, but you get close. Hannah got close to God. You may be seated. Hannah got close to God, and because she got close to God, she got the strength she needed to get the job done. But there's one more thing, and then I'll bring this to some closure today. Not only do you have to look to God to be your source and to be your Savior, you got to look to God to be your sovereign. Notice the testimony of praise that comes out of verse 2. She says, there is none holy as the Lord. For there is none beside thee, neither is there any rock like our God. I got in a discussion this week with some people because this was a historic week. Kobe Bryant retired and scored 60 points in his final game. And then on the same night, the Warriors, Golden State, any Golden State folk in here? The Warriors broke the record of Michael Jordan. And Steph Curry, he keeps on breaking records. And so, Brother Booker, there's a big debate now. Would the Warriors today beat the Chicago Bulls of the night. That's the comparison. That's the comparison. Y'all saying no, but they got a computer thing, and the computer thing showed that the Warriors would win. But I think the computer is leaving out this fact. The computer is leaving out back when Jordan played, you could play rough. Steph Curry would be hurt so many times he wouldn't last half the game. Because Rodman would say, let him come on in here. And so it's hard to compare because it's different eras, different rules, different regulations. But when it comes to God, there is no comparison. Why? Because he's sovereign. Listen what she says about it. She says there is none, absolutely none, nada, none holy. In other words, none that's set apart for sacred use like God. You do know that when something is claimed to be holy, it's set apart for sacred use. That's why I never understood choir members wearing robes out in the street. I never understood how you just drag your choir robe like it ain't nothing. When it's sacred, set apart for God to get the glory. God is holy. He's holy. He's set apart. In other words, there must have been some other gods in the neighborhood. But she said there ain't no God like my God. Because he's holy, set apart. But not only is that, she also says, for there is none beside thee. In other words, he's superior. Yeah, when you start mentioning your gods, your idols, those things that you depend on, she says, oh no, there's none like him. And then she caps it and says, is there any rock like our God? The rock is a metaphor that's used about 75 times in the Old Testament. The word of rock or serpent. And it means that which is reliable. Do y'all know anybody that you can count on like God? Do you know anybody that if you call him in the midnight hour, he will answer your prayer? Do you know anybody that will come to your rescue? She said there's nobody like God, and there's no rock like him. He is one you can count on. And this message has been preached today because God said you need to count on me. No matter what you're facing, no matter what you are encountering in life, you need to count on me. I have known some people that I leaned on and they moved. And guess what? I failed. But when you lean on Jesus, when you put your trust in him, that's when you're going to witness a look at God moment. I'm telling you, some things get ready to happen in your life because of your trust, because of your faithfulness in God, that you're going to be able to say, look at God. In other words, God's going to get the credit. God ought to get the glory. God ought to be recognized as the source, as the sovereign. God ought to be the one that you said, that's how I got it. I didn't get it because of my intellect and my ingenuity. I did not get it because of how well I look or how well I dress and how well I can talk. But I got it because of the grace of God. I wish I had some folk in here that would appreciate, like Sister Hannah, the grace of God. In spite of what folk did to you, in spite of how people mistreated you, in spite of how folk messed over you, in spite of all of that, look at God. God brought you out. God brought you through. God made a way. God opened a door. God saved your son. God turned your child around. God gave you another job. God gave you a promotion. God gave you a house. God gave you a home. God gave you a family. God gave you somebody. God gave it to me. And since God gave it to me, I'm going to give God the glory. I feel like I'm going to go right there. Look at God. He's been my shelter in the time of storm. Look at God. He's made a way out of no way. Look at God. I wish I had a few more look at God folk in here. Tell somebody, I can't even tell you all. But when I look back over my life and I think things over, I can't help but to say, look at God. Don't you get no new car and start leaning you. You better get a new car and say, look at God. Because guess what? That new car will become an old car and will break down on the side of the road. But if you keep saying, look at God, before the old one becomes so old that will run down, God will give you something brand new. I wish I had some witnesses up in here. Can I get 10 of y'all over there to holler, look at God? Yeah, I'm a witness of what God can do. I wish I had a few folk over on this side that'll holler, look at God. Yeah, you listen, I hear some of y'all prophesying over there because God's getting ready to bring something in your direction simply because you said, look at God. You're pointing somebody before it gets to your door because you believe God's going to turn that situation in your favor. Can I get somebody in this middle section to holler, look at God? God woke me up this morning. He started me on my way. I was sick, but God picked me up and God turned me around. Somebody holler, look at God. You got to keep looking at God and giving God the glory. If you want to experience